I want to know, is there a memorable moment in your life when you were ashamed to admit to someone that you were into board games?
No.
You've never felt shame for being into board games? Not like, when I say shame, shame's a really big word, right? And I think it's an important word to analyze in the context of board games. But like, you've never felt like, I don't want to tell this person I'm doing this.
No.
Not once.
No, I mean, why would I be ashamed of it? It's not like I'm doing anything illegal or anything icky or whatever, is it?
Of course not. But I think there's a certain social stigma that comes with playing board games sometimes. Or even like a certain level of kind of like, I don't want to tell this person I'm playing board games because then I'd have to explain the whole board game deal. Like, and they'll say, is it Monopoly? And you have to be like, yes, kind of like Monopoly, but actually, slightly different.
Are you talking about safety? Because I think that's a different thing. Are you talking about shame or safety? Shame, no. Safety, maybe.
Safety?
Yeah, because if you're anticipating a negative reaction to something, that is quite scary sometimes.
Right? You're right. That is.
But that's not shame. That's fear and needing to feel a sense of safety, because the way that they may judge you and the way they may react to you and the way they may treat you might be very, very different depending on who they are. If you don't know them, you can't judge that, you can't anticipate that. So in that sense, yes, but not shame.
But see, I think for some people, and I want to hear from people, who don't mind being candid about this, right? I think that sense of a lack of safety and shame can sometimes overlap. I think it's the case for me sometimes where I cannot distinguish between the two. Now that you explain it, like, I totally get it, right? It makes perfect sense, right? But I think for me, they sometimes overlap. I want to know if they overlap for other people. And I want to know other people's stories, if they sometimes catch themselves, like feeling shame around the hobby, or as being part of the hobby. And that's kind of in line with, I think, maybe acknowledging it, and by acknowledging it, maybe overcoming it slightly. We'll talk about shame and its association to board games more in a future episode. But right now, on this very episode of Talk Cardboard, a podcast about board games
and everything adjacent, we have me, Elaine, and you.
Me, the boy who won Terra Mystica again.
On today's episode, we will be terraforming a mystic land in Age of Innovation. See what I did there? Doing important science work in raising robots and playing a space Del Boy in Sidereal Confluence Bifurcation.
Did you just say a space Del Boy?
Yeah, because you're wheeling and dealing and, getting trades. And
Nice. That's a reference that's lost to non-English or non-British viewers.
I think Only Fools and Horses is a famous enough show. It's not the best show, but it's well enough known, I think, worldwide.
If you disagree,
I say worldwide. I don't mean worldwide. I mean, more than just in Britain.
Okay, fair enough. I don't believe that, but sure.
Let's talk about our first game. Age of Innovation comes from publisher Capstan Games by Helga Ostertag, with art by Alvaro Calvo Escudero and Lucas Siegemann.
Elaine, Terra Mystica is back. Can you believe it? I can, because of course Terra Mystica is back. It's one of those perennial board games that's been around for a while and popular around our house. Although I am ashamed to admit it, that it's been a while since I broke out Terra Mystica. It's actually been as long as the release of the latest Terra Mystica expansion, which is season something. Boats that had ships in it. But it was so not memorable for me, that expansion, that I don't even remember exactly what it does, except that it added things sideways rather than
I don't
other
remember
ways.
what it does either.
Yeah.
No.
Anyway, this is Age of Innovation, a Terra Mystica game. A title so bland, I, in a previous episode of the podcast, confused it with Age of Industry. I thought it was called Age of Industry. Turns out, no, it's called Age of Innovation. Thematically, not much of a difference between if it was called Age of Industry or whatever. It's kind of what it is. They basically took the somewhat risque setting of Terra Mystica, which is basically race war, with cults and priests sacrificing themselves to go up on tracks. So it's now slightly family friendly because instead of temples and is a sanctuary or something like that. I can't remember what the name of the building. You now have schools and universities, and you have scholars that go and study things with books. So it's tamer. It's not any more exciting, but it's tamer, right? I don't know if I want to say much about the previous setting of Terra Mystica because it's so abstract. It doesn't even make any sense. So I'm not gonna dive into that or delve deep into that. But like it's been slightly rethemed. But here's the weird thing. So and apologies to anyone who's not familiar with Terra Mystica. I'll explain what that game is in just a moment. But here's the thing that really kind of boggled me. I heard from every other reviewing outlet and just kind of public hubbub that like, oh, this is pretty much Terra Mystica. And what I thought that meant, right, is that, oh, it's like pretty much Terra Mystica as in the same way that Gaia Project was pretty much Terra Mystica.
I see.
Like, there are changes, but, it's broadly a similar game. And I should have paid more attention because when people are saying this is pretty much Terra Mystica, they really mean this is Terra Mystica with a few dials tweaked, a resource added, and more variability, right? That's kind of it. And if you're familiar with Terra Mystica, that's all you need to know. This is a new edition of the game that you don't need to buy if you already own Terra Mystica.
It felt like a sort of expansion, little expansion to it, and that was it, really.
At the price of
a whole game.
A whole game, basically, yeah. So I wouldn't recommend it to anyone who enjoys Terra Mystica on the level where they sometimes break it out. But of course, then I know that Terra Mystica has quite a vibrant competitive community, or at least it used to have it when it came out. People were quite into, milking that game for everything that it had. I don't know how long that persisted, whether it's still a thing. I imagine people play it on like BGA or wherever it is available online. But this new version definitely offers something for those players because the big change up here is the variable player powers and starting setups and that kind of jazz.
Yeah, that's a big change, that it starts differently.
Yes.
But then it feels very similar once you've done the starting bit.
Yes. So what is Terra Mystica? Terra Mystica is basically, I think, a good introduction to the heavier side of Eurogaming. It is a highly competitive game, I would say. You certainly feel competition, and it's definitely not a game that's like heads down, I'm doing my own thing, everyone else is doing their own thing. It's a thing that it's a game that has a map, and the map is very important and interactive in terms of like positioning and where you put your pieces and where your opponents put your pieces. And the gist of it is that you each play...
Where your opponents put their pieces.
Yeah. You each play a faction of some sort. So it could be goblins or you had psychics or something like that, So I had some sort of seafarers or something, like they're no longer just fantasy races. They're more like kind of like... a vibe thing, yeah. Jobs or maybe fantasy races, And so you have this faction, and this faction will have a native terrain that they like to live on, and they don't like to live on other terrain. So if I live like on rivers, I don't want any volcanoes or sand or forests,
green.
any of that all that has to go away, and I will terraform it into rivers because I can only build onto rivers. And the way the game is done is that you want to build adjacent to your existing pieces because you're kind of forced to, but the way the map is done is that like you have your terrain and then it's surrounded entirely by not your terrain, and then based on what terrain it is, it's harder or easier to terraform it. And the terraforming, that's where the real economy begins because the cost of it is quite expensive. But once you terraform it, you can build one tiny little workshop, and that workshop becomes, I think, still a trading post. I'm not sure what the new version of the building is called. And then it can go become a castle, or it can become a school, and the school can become a university. Except we didn't call them schools. We called them...
Nipples.
We did. And why did we call them nipples?
Because they were round, and then they had a round dot on the top. And we are children.
We are. Can I just say that there was a moment in the game where I passed around and I said, well, now I get 15 points. Mm-hmm. And our friend said, why do you get 15 points? And I said, because I got all my nipples out.
Yeah, you did say that.
We are children, aren't we? Yeah. Fun times at the no pun included household. And I guess that also kind of brings us up to the asymmetry of it all. You know, Terra Mystica is one of the big games that popularized like really asymmetric player powers in board games. I think it was definitely like a game that brought that to the forefront, and the excitement of that, because every faction had very different abilities and different ways to score points and try to achieve different things and build different buildings and had different synergies and strategies and all that kind of jazz. And it all gets very bitty and very procedural and mechanical, and it's about sequencing things at the right time, but also like watching for opportunities, what other players do, managing your economy, and going up on tracks. There's tracks in Terra Mystica. If you don't enjoy tracks, there's still tracks here. And so this new version has some new additions. One of the big things is that it used to be that the faction that you got, it determined what terrain you were on. Now you draft a combination of a faction and a randomly assigned terrain to it, and also a bonus tile, which kind of gives you a bonus for the round. And everyone does that. There's an alternative way to distribute that, but that was a big change, because not only did it introduce more variability into the game. Suddenly, like, this faction could be on worse terrain or better terrain. For example, I got really lucky. I was last in turn order, so I got to pick my faction and terrain combo first. And I kind of picked it on feel, because I had the Seafarers, and they were like...
And you like blue.
And I like blue, and they were paired with the blue player board, with the blue terrain, with the river terrain. And I was like, well, like, these sea people, or whatever they're called, I can't remember what they're called, the boat people, right? Like, that has to be good with, the increased shipping that this board provides me with. And it turned out it was amazing, because it was just this very aggressive point generation engine that I took all the way towards the end of the game and, pushed it for all I could. And I did really well.
You said better or worse terrain. I don't think you really meant that. I think it's more like synergy between
how
what
they
you
pair
get.
up.
There is no kind of better or worse, because I think the board is pretty equal in where you start, what your starting terrain is, and how easy or difficult it is to get to the different terrains. So how it pairs with your faction,
So that's a big change. And they also introduced some other changes. Aside from renaming it and gussing up the art a little bit, there is this new element of books, which is a new resource. And these books feed into this new thing called innovation tiles, which is, again, more asymmetry. Like kind of powerful abilities that you get to either do extra things on your turn, like maybe get some precious resources like scholars, which are, again, a resource that's hard to get, but you can utilize them in many different effective ways, like going up on tracks effectively, or going up some other tracks effectively, or and I'm making that sound bland, but actually in the game it feels quite impactful. And so you could get something like that, or you could get like a big point scoring thing that suddenly just like propels you along the victory point track.
Some of them are one-off resources or one-off point scoring, so it really makes a difference as to when you take that tile, because if for example you're scoring schools, the amount of schools you've put out, that from the start that the maximum is going to be, say it's 5 points per school that you've put out, that the maximum is going to be 15. right? But if you've only got one school out, when you take that tile, then you're only getting 5 from it. So you're not getting it at the maximum point scoring time for it. So so there is a lot to think about. And some of them, so some of the other ones have an income value on them. So it depends when you take that too, because maybe you want to take that earlier in the game, because if you take that right near the end, then you're not going to get much value out of it. So it is weighing up how many points you're going to be able to squeak out from each of these tiles, and that was an interesting because it was an interesting decision, because there's only 3 spaces on each board for those tiles, and they cost a lot of books to get.
And books are hard to get.
Books are hard to get. They cost 5 books to get each, or potentially more, right? Because the higher you go up, like the first one is free, the second one cost you, but didn't cost me because it was my faction ability, right?
Yeah.
And then the third one cost even more, like cost 1 more and 2 more or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly.
So you know, it's very much like planning out how you are going to play your entire game before you play your first round.
Yeah, and it requires this sort of like intimate familiarity with how these things will affect
each other
and the board, and what will you be able to do, and actually, like, I think it's very telling that Age of Innovation is weirdly a full new game that is aimed at people who already own Terra Mystica and really like it that much that they would buy another copy of this game, because our friend Carly from Gnarly Carly Games, who played a lovely game of Age of Innovation with us, go check her channel out. She pointed out that the previous rulebook for Terra Mystica, the original Terra Mystica, it had like a predetermined setup for a 2, 3, 4, 5 player game, depending on how many. Like, if you're playing the first time, play with these factions, place your starting pieces in these places. You know, just kind of everything mapped out for you so you can sit down and actually play without worrying about how fair is this to everyone, you know? And that does not exist in this new version. It just goes, right, do a faction draft, last person to go picks first, and, you know, pick well, right? Like, oh, okay. But how do I know? So I had a feel that this was going to be a good combination, because, like, I've played, you know, Terra Mystica before quite a few times, and that worked out well for me, right? But if you haven't, that's such a daunting proposition for a first-time player. And the alternative, like, kind of, you know, faction distribution thing, that's even for, like, more advanced play, so don't touch that, right? It's quite daunting, and it's quite aimed at people who are familiar with this system, or maybe, you know, like Terra Mystica before, but then kind of, you know, passed on the copy to somewhere else and are now maybe thinking, oh yeah, maybe I'll get into Terra Mystica again. I think it's for people like that. Yeah,
and because it's language independent, when you are presented with a lot of symbols and pick something, and you haven't played the game for a long time, it is quite difficult to work out what these symbols all mean together and how they're going to help you win the game.
It is. Having said that, I had a whale of a time. I had a really good time with this. It reminded me why I like Terra Mystica, and it was good to play with someone who also enjoys Terra Mystica very much. So that was like a nice vibe. There was a room of Terra Mystica appreciators enjoying the new version.
I think you're right. Yeah. I think it's good to play with people that already like Terra Mystica. Yeah, I think that does help. How do you feel about this versus like Gaia Project, or would you rather play this? Like, say I mean, we have all 3, right? Which would you rather play?
Well, this is the age-old debate, right? Like, I don't think that the Terra Mystica expansions or the various promos that I've collected over time have added anything to it that is so monumentally game-changing that would, you know, make me pick that over Age of Innovation. So Age of Innovation over Terra Mystica, right? But Terra Mystica versus, so let's say like this is the new Terra Mystica, and then let's just say this is Terra Mystica.
Yeah.
Age of Innovation is Terra Mystica, and then is that better than Gaia Project? Well, that's the age-old debate, right?
Of course, yeah.
And there are people who are strict Gaia Project, and then there are people who are strict Terra Mystica. I'm a both person. I'm one of those people who has both copies because it kind of sees a value in either version. If you're not familiar with either version, Gaia Project is kind of like the sequel to Terra Mystica. It's in space with really notoriously terrible artwork.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it notoriously terrible artwork?
Yeah. No, it is. It is. It's
Okay.
It's bad. It's not good.
Art is subjective.
It is, but I think that took a step too far into almost trying to be zany, but not quite good enough to be zany, so it just looks bad.
I like the box cover.
Sure, okay, but I don't. It just looks. I think okay. My verdict on the Gaia Project artwork ultimately is that it is naff.
But it reminds me of, All Your Base Will Belong to Us, like the beginning of the.
That's not known for its like art.
Like, when the guy is sitting in the cockpit of the airship.
It's definitely got that vibe on the cover.
Yeah, I really like that about it.
So basically, Terra Mystica in space, but functionally different because it added a lot of new ideas to it, like federations replacing cities, which work very differently, and then the space actually being a function because the map is no longer like condensed by every spot could be someone's spot, but actually there's a lot of gaps and you have to like traverse through those gaps. So and most importantly, it added technologies and tied them to the tracks, right? And so now your advancement on these tracks, which before just kind of a race for points and maybe some marginal advantages, that was a big feature. So Age of Innovation added some of that. Now there is a reason to advance onto the tracks because they provide you with some income of a resource. It's nowhere near like Gaia Project where advancing on the right track was, crucially important for your strategy or whatever. It is more abstract again. So Age of Innovation took some of those, but Gaia Project was also known for being quite a bit more convoluted than Terra Mystica. So I don't know. When I want a heavier Terra Mystica, I want the Gaia Project. When I want the smoother Terra Mystica, I got Age of Innovation. And old Terra Mystica, I don't think there's a reason for it to be now. I guess there's, the expansions added a bunch of factions and variability, and then the Seafarers thing. I wasn't a fan of that, but I know some people, again, in the Terra Mystica community who are Terra Mystica buffs also enjoy that. It wasn't a big thing for me. It didn't really change up the game in important ways that made it interesting to a more casual player. But yeah, I still don't have an answer for you. I think for me, it's still when I want a cleaner version, I'll play Age of Innovation, and when I want the clunkier but kind of more nitty gritty and more strategic and tactical version, I'll play Gaia Project. Because the factions in Gaia Project are still really very funky and very out there, and they kind of offer a different experience. There's no clean cut for me, I'm sorry. But I want to reiterate, I like this game a lot. I really enjoy it. I think it's a great example of what a good heavy Euro game is to people who've never played a heavy Euro game, but played things like Castles of Burgundy or whatever, and kind of want to explore that territory of like, well, what's deeper? So you've got Great Western Trail is great for that, and you've got Terra Mystica. And Great Western Trail is a bit more heads down and a bit less interactive, but still interactive, whereas Terra Mystica is quite highly interactive, but still has that sort of demure, thinky quality to it.
It is interactive in the way that you are fighting over stuff and desperately hoping that someone is not going to do the exact thing that you want to do and mess up your plans. Like they're not going to take the tile that they're not going to be able to spend their books. You're constantly looking at what resources the other players have because you're thinking, have they got enough books to be able to do this? Have they got enough cubes to be able to build? Have they got, do you know what I mean? Like to terraform and build. And you're wondering, I mean, it is a race, right? It's but also like when you terraform and you build things, you might be giving a bonus to other players too, right? So where do you want to terraform, and how easy is it for you to terraform somewhere versus will I be giving them a bonus for doing this here? So yeah, it is quite interactive, but in a very mean way.
In a mean but also simultaneously demure way, because it's not like, it's very passive aggressive. It's like, would you like some of this good stuff, like you know, like the power, but it costs you big 3 points.
Talking of which, I finally managed to get my head around the bowls.
Yeah,
the 3 bowls. What I really liked about Age of Innovation actually is that the board is dual layer, so there's cutouts, so the pips in the bowls don't like whiz off somewhere. They're quite neatly contained, and I managed to actually figure out with help how that worked.
You've always had some struggle with the bowl mechanism, with the power mechanism.
I had a mental block on that.
Yeah, you're not the only one. I know some people really kind of like, it's just unintuitive to people how that works.
It is,
right?
yeah. But you know, it's funny because when I figured it out, or like when you both helped me figure it out, I was like, why did I ever find this difficult? This is easy. so you know, it was a bit like learning a language or something, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Like at first you'll struggle, and you're like, I'm never going to get this. I have no idea how this works. I've tried to learn this and I couldn't. And then suddenly it clicks.
It's like getting the F chord on the guitar for the first time, right?
I guess, yeah. Yeah, or any chord for that matter of fact. And then the more you do it, you go, well, why did I ever struggle with this?
Yeah.
So that was good. I managed to figure that out, and I didn't need help with that every time I needed it this game. So I really enjoyed Age of Innovation. I forgot how much I enjoyed Terra Mystica because we haven't played it for a long time. Or Gaia Project, we haven't played it for a long time, and I very much enjoyed the drafting quite a lot actually. And although it doesn't change the game up a huge amount, it adds like a little bit more variability and choice in what you're getting, and it gives you a little bit more agency, I feel, as well, right at the beginning.
I mean, yeah, until you learn the game quite well, because at first you were like exploring, but then you're like, I think when you get around to familiarizing yourself with the pairings and what that pairing means, and you're like, oh, I'm first in turn order, which means I get to pick these last, which means everyone's going to get this good stuff, and I'm going to end up with the duff pairing, right? Although what was nice in the free-player game, that there were like 7 pairings, right? So actually, even the last player got a lot of choice in terms of what they got to pick. That was quite good. And and this is, again, probably relevant to people who already know Terra Mystica. The other cool bit was that, all the pairings had the bonus tiles as well, and only the pairings that got picked, their bonus tiles go into the game, and then the free bonus tiles that weren't assigned to the pairings also go into the game. So every faction that doesn't get picked, you're kind of eliminating the bonus tiles that go into the game, and that was very, very peculiar. And I think why I was really lucky is that I also got a bonus tile on my faction and on my like terrain pairing that was the perfect bonus tile to be in the game, because it literally rewarded me for placing workshops in the same way that my faction did. Yeah, so it was a double up on that. Yeah. Oh, I was breezing through that game. There was a round where I had like both, and it was the round that also rewarded me for building dwellings. Yeah. And I built like, I think 6, and everyone was upset with me. Like, I wasn't even playing an interactive game at that point. I was just like, it's my turn. I will build another.
That was heads down.
Yeah, I'll build another thing. And everyone just goes,
is it my turn? Yeah. Yeah, I said to Carly, actually, it's a game that you feel either the turn comes too quickly
Yeah.
Right. And you're still like, I have no idea what I need to do. I'm still planning this out. Like, please give me some time to plan this out. Or the turn does not come quick enough. And you are desperate for it to be your turn so you can do the thing that you really need to do or want to do before someone else gets in your way of doing it. So I never quite felt like, oh, good, it's my turn. I'm exactly ready to do what I want to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think with that in mind, one final thing that I think this new version brought to me was this sense of sometimes being able to go more askew in terms of like what you're doing strategy wise. So because I had options of getting rewards for more esoteric things in this game, I via these innovation tiles and books and stuff like that, I could kind of forego the sensible thing of like, oh, you know, I'll make a city because that'll give me lots of points and whatever. Like, instead of doing like weird esoteric things for the entire penultimate round of the game and finding that I've actually benefited a lot, saved a bunch of resources for the last round where I could get like rewards for founding a city. So like, it gives you more ways to navigate the game that are a lot more subtle and not like evident from the beginning, but are there and let you be a bit, you know, wild and crazy with it.
I clutched defeat out of the jaws of victory. And I think it was all down to the penultimate round, because I think I misplayed the penultimate round. So going into the ultimate round, I did not have enough resources to do anything that I needed to do. And then I misplayed the ultimate round, the last round, and came last.
Yeah, which is a shame because you were leading the pack for the entire game.
2/3 of the game, probably three-quarters of the game, 2/3 of the game. I was,
you were significantly ahead.
I felt good as well in my position. Like I felt like something was happening. I knew what I was doing. I knew what my plan was. I could achieve the round goals, you know, because the round goals aren't secret, and I really like that about this game. And I know that was in Terra Mystica too, so it's not a new thing, but something that this game does that other games sometimes don't is it tells you exactly what all of the round goals are going to be for the 8 rounds, right? There's 6 rounds, sorry. So you, even if you think, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to achieve this round, but maybe I can get it maybe I can get the one next round, and you build up to that instead, right? And then because some of them give you quite a lot of points, there is quite a difference in the amount of points that you can get for them. So that was really neat. And I felt like I did that well. I felt like I was going really well. And then it all just came crashing down. Maybe I just got too confident, maybe.
Yeah,
hubris.
maybe.
I think there were a couple of times that I hubrised a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I thought, well, this is a bit of a gamble, but you know, I'm okay. I'm doing all right. And then it did not work out.
Yeah, you can never take your foot off the pedal in Terra Mystica.
No, you can't.
Even when you're doing well, you have to maintain that kind of constant momentum of I need to account for all my resources. I need to account for like where I'm going to score for this or that, and what, you know, that's still there. But what I like about this new version is, again, the innovation tiles let you be a bit more loose with how you approach these things. You still need to be, you know, as tight as ever, but like there's more avenues for you to go into different directions. So all in all, I think this is a great new version of Terra Mystica. I don't think anyone needs to buy this if they own Terra Mystica.
Yeah. It's not going to change your game significantly. But if you don't own Terra Mystica and you have been interested in Terra Mystica or Age of Innovation, I think it's good. It's good. Yeah,
it's really good. It's top tier.
It's a fun time.
Top tier heavy Euro game for me.
Let's move on to a game where I think we're children making robots. So Raising Robots comes from publisher Nauvoo Games by designer Brett Sobel and Seth Van Orden, with art by Victoria Fayado and Howard McWilliam.
There's this old axiom of like either be better, bigger, or different. Now, when I got a copy of Raising Robots, I had a pretty good impression that the game is in a very similar space to Wingspan. And
because why?
Because it's a tableau builder where you have 3 rows of cards, and those 3 rows of cards, you play into those the cards sequentially. And then when you activate the space, all the cards activate from left to right.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It's like the same principle as Wingspan.
Robot Wingspan.
Robot Wingspan. Cute, adorable robot Wingspan. I mean, one of my robots, and I say this with so much pride, but one of the robots I built was a washing machine.
Yeah, I saw that. It was adorable.
And so where the art department is, you know, in
Bang
question.
on. Oh.
It's yeah, the answer is it's bang on, right?
Yeah.
Like the art is superb in this game and whimsical and funny. It is functionally very different from Wingspan, and I don't think it has the same mass appeal as cute birds, you know, not just cute birds, but like gorgeous illustrations. Yeah, real birds. Yeah, gorgeous illustrations of birds. This is more cutesy and cartoonish and has a very different vibe. But the art is good. The robots are adorable. They're funny.
Yeah.
You know, I like a lot of them.
They've all got sweet names as well.
Yes. So you are not collecting birds. You are building but you are collecting robots, putting them in a tableau in one of 3 rows, and then activating that row to do all the things that the robots do to give you more things so you can put more robots down, etc., right? Now, it is different, I guess. I'm just not sure it's better or bigger than Wingspan. Because, first of all, nothing can be bigger than Wingspan. I think that game has that part cornered, right? And when it comes to better, I don't think it is better than Wingspan, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to have a design conversation with Wingspan and to say, like, we're taking the chassis of Wingspan, but we're putting an entirely different engine. We're putting, like, you know, like an 8-liter turbo engine that's gonna have 17,000 horsepower or whatever. I don't know what horsepower is. I don't know how that works.
It's not 1 horse. You learned this. It's 7 horses.
Or whatever. Yes, exactly. I don't know what horsepower, how much horsepower is good or bad, but like a lot of horsepower. And to make all of that work, we are doing a lot of fiddly stuff within that chassis, you know, like mounting the engine with like 17,000 wires, one wire for each horsepower, you know, and kind of, you know, spreading them all across the car. And this analogy's gotten out of hand.
It's gone wild, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
Like a wild horse. Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks.
It's basically, I don't think it's unfair to say this is more convoluted Wingspan, but like, in a realm where it's more thinky and more heads down and more kind of like, I'm trying to make this thing work, nobody interrupt me, please. Right?
Yeah, it is very heads down, isn't it?
Yeah.
I had no idea what you were doing or how well you were doing or how you were using your resources, what your robots were, anything. Yeah, I was just doing my own thing and you were doing your own thing.
I just had to stop you at one point and say, have a look at this washing machine robot. And you were like, oh, that's good. And then you moved on to your own thing. And I was doing my own thing. And that was the entire game. And at the end of the game, we compared some scores. Now, having said that, there is one thing that it adds that is very functionally different from Wingspan. And that is the race for the galaxy mechanism of selecting what actions are going to be available this round. So there are like 5 possible actions. One is to play robots. The other 3 is to activate the rows of robots, 1 for each row. And the final action is the upgrade action, which I'll explain a little later because it's unique to this game, I think. And so the way you select those is that you draw these like energy cards, and then you assign 2 cards to these energy cards that represent the 2 actions that you want to do. But then these energy cards might also distribute energy cubes onto this action, which might give more energy to other players. And it gets kind of weird and very hard to predict. It's like a less clean mechanism of Race for the Galaxy. Race for the Galaxy, you just select like some phases, or like one phase, and that's the phase that you get to do. And other players select some phases, and whichever phases got selected, you know, that's what all players get to do. Here, you might be able to do some of the phases that other players selected, but maybe not. And then the ability that, like your ability to function within those phases also depends on what the other players do or don't do, or select or don't select.
Yeah.
And it gets very unpredictable and convoluted. And the result of that, I found to be, is that I will hedge my bets in terms of I really need this. And then if something else happens, that's not in my control. And so we'll see what happens, I guess.
Yeah, you said you had a very sort of singular path, a very singular thought of how you would achieve victory.
Yeah, so I had a scoring card that I got at the beginning of the game that says, well, you'll score extra points if you achieve this. So I was like, okay, that's plan one. I looked at the cards that I got dealt at the beginning, the robots that would help with that plan. And then mid-game through the game, I got another scoring card, and like I was like, well, that's plan two, right? And I executed those two plans to the best of my ability, and that won me the game. Now I noticed that you went for like a third scoring card in the game, like for
because
like
my scientist, their initial ability was to take two scoring cards rather than one.
Yes.
And then I got a third because that's what happens halfway through the game. So I had three. And I didn't do as well with the three as you did with the two. And also my scientist ability is that it gives you one level higher up. So say you need to collect green robots, right? You want robots on the green line. If you have, say, I'm making this up, but say you have 2, you get 3 points. If you have 3, you get 4 points. My ability meant that if I only had the 3, I would have still got the one above, like the 4 points for having 3, for example, right? So yeah, and I still didn't do very well with it.
And I don't know, like, I enjoyed the game, right? It was a fun game. In comparison to Wingspan, I would see why some people would like this more, because it does have a lot more meat on the bones, like, so now you don't just play a card and it does something, right? It functionally has two abilities that activate based on how much energy you got for that phase, for that round, which again is dependent on what you select and what the other players select and what upgrades you've gotten. But then you can also, so you have the fifth action block, which is upgrades, which like you spend a very precious resource, and they are precious because
super precious. It's very punitive in that way. Like
it is.
So when you can convert resources, for example, you can only convert one resource at a time. So even if you have 10 of the starting resource, and so say you have 10 sensors, right, and the conversion is sensor into command line, you can still only convert one of those. You can't convert all 10, even if you need the command line resource. Like, it's very punitive in that way, and getting cards was really tricky.
So I had some nice cards. I was like, convert this one resource into 3 duct tape, but like, and duct tape is the wild resource.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, this works. I'll keep doing that a lot,
Semi-wild resource. Yeah.
Semi-wild resource.
Not true wild.
Okay,
there's two different wild resources.
Let's not get into the weeds of it.
No, but I'm just kind of reiterating how convoluted it feels in that way.
If you want me to get more convoluted, it is the wild resource, because the other true wild resource isn't the wild resource, it's the cost, right? So like that's what you can. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What's important is that the reason you would upgrade is because you get to take pips off and they power up like one thing on your board, but then you get to put it on a card, on a robot card, and it adds like an alternative ability that you can do instead, which is often better or activates with less energy, right? So each card, unlike in Wingspan, where the card just does what it does, each card can be upgraded. So that's like already a layer of complexity, right? But these upgrades, where they come from, right, they also unlock something. So that is another thing that you manage, right? And then on top of that, these upgrades could go on your scoring card, which would power up that scoring card. They could go on your asymmetrical ability that you get at the beginning of the game. It powers up that. Is that important? Who knows? You can't upgrade everything. There's too many upgrades, right? And so that's already a layer of bittiness that Wingspan just doesn't have. Then on top of that, you have that whole fifth action, right? So again, that's another thing to manage. On top of that, you have that variable face selection from Race for the Galaxy, but a lot less predictable than Race for the Galaxy, because it has a lot of like levers with this energy and what energy means to you and how much you can you gamble, what bet can you take, and on top of that, like it has resources that mean different things, and there's it is a very bitty game, and thus it creates an incredibly busy board. There's so many kind of little tokens flying around, and so many symbols and so many like dials and levers that you can pull that it looks, first of all, it looks messy. Apart from the art that looks, like the vibe's great, right? But the presentation, there's something about the aesthetic functionality of your play area that is just overloaded.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that. I totally agree. Like it is very overloaded. Like I complained to you that the spaces that hold the resources weren't big enough to hold more than a couple of resources. And you said, well, just stack them on top of each other. But I'm quite clumsy, right? So I'm liable to knock them off. So that kind of doesn't work for me. And everything felt like it was everywhere. And on top of that, there is a luck element, like any game that you're drawing cards, that whether you're going to get a card that is useful to you. I mean, you can use the card as a wild resource, right? But they are hard to get, right? So when you do draw them, you're really hoping that there's going to be one of those cards that you can use rather than just using it as a resource. And I didn't get the cards that I needed. But there is always an element of luck.
So I think you mentioned a number of things that to me are, like, I'm going to say interesting, but that's not necessarily a positive. And what I mean by that is that, like, there's a bunch of elements here, and all of them feel, like I said before, like a conversation design-wise with Wingspan, as in perceived flaws of Wingspan. I don't even know what those are, but like they feel like they are. Like, a card is now a resource, right? So you can spend that as maybe a resource when you can pay a wild resource. So, okay, so that maybe lets you do something with a card, right? And that, on the face of it, sounds nice and interesting. But the game is loaded with these elements, like these sort of like design conversation elements that are trying to maybe perceivably fix whatever, issues someone had with Wingspan, that played Wingspan a lot or whatever, it feels like there's a lot of answers in this game that it might not be particularly interesting to someone who isn't experienced with Wingspan to begin with. So I think when I said, be bigger, be better, or be different, right? Well, it's clearly not different, right? It's clearly not bigger, because you can't be bigger than Wingspan. So is it better? I think it's trying to be better. It's trying to be something for someone who's played Wingspan and went, well, this isn't quite doing it for me. I need something meatier, right? So here it is, it's meatier. But for most people, I think, just if you're interested in Wingspan, just get Wingspan, right? And unless you've really played this out, or you have friends who really enjoyed Wingspan, but you don't like Wingspan, and it's like you like a meatier game, maybe this is a way to get your friends into that sort of meatier game space.
Yeah, I didn't have as much of a problem as you did with the energy randomness and the action randomness, I think. I found that quite interesting, because there was, like you said, there were things that, okay, I definitely need to do this on this turn, so this is the card I'm gonna play, and to the best amount of energy that I have, so I can definitely do it, the best I can. But then there were actions that I was like, well, if this comes up, this would also be useful, and this is what I can do with it. So you're thinking about not only what actions you want to take, but what else might come up. And I quite enjoyed that.
I think it was all right. Like, what bothered me, I think, is that because the game is so punitive with resources and it wants you to be so incredibly precise, it's hard to be precise when you don't know what's available to you, right? So you cannot make like these sort of plans of like, I'm going to do this,
No,
I'm going to
for
do that.
sure,
And I think if you were able to, it might even speed the game up, because there were moments where like, okay, now it's this space. And I'm like, wait, I need to think now because things have changed.
Well, the rulebook says that you can take all the actions at once. Like, you don't need to wait for the other. You don't need to say, okay, we're in the upgrade phase now, we're in this phase now, we're in that phase now. You can just do all the actions that you can do, as long as you do them in the right order, that you just do all the ones that you can do.
No, I get that. But it made me feel like I'm calculating one time, and then the cards get revealed, and then I need to recalculate everything, right? So I'm doing the calculation twice, effectively.
Yeah, that's fair. Overall, I did not enjoy this game. I had a nice time playing it with you, but I'm not burning to play it again.
No, it's not exactly, the genre is not my jam. I think I've learned that when it comes to this tableau building, lots of cards genre, I much prefer leaner than meatier. I had issues with Arc Nova as well, and I know a lot of people love that game, and that's cool, you know. But for me, this felt like work. Like a lot of work,
For not a lot of return.
For not a lot of return.
I
Yeah, I
agree.
felt like I was expending a lot of brain power to get like
One resource.
yeah, right. And I was like, this. I'm not sure I'm gelling with this. But like when we go leaner to games like Forest Shuffle, I'm just suddenly like all that extra rules crafting calculation goes away, and I get to just enjoy like these silly card combos and putting them together and going, look, you know, rabbits and foxes, points, nice.
See, that's the other thing. There wasn't really card combos. Like, it didn't really matter that much what you had previously played.
No, it did matter for me. So I played a card that gave me processes, and then the card after that converted processes into duct tape, and then the card on a different row converted duct tape into victory points. So that was a freeway card combo
I
that kept
see,
cycling
yeah.
and cycling and making me victory points.
Yeah, maybe I just didn't get that from the cards that I had. The cards that I got were completely like different. None of them worked with each other very well, and because it's so difficult to get cards, you can't sort of go, well, I'm just going to discard these and get like a bunch more.
Right.
There is one action that will let you discard cards to get more.
You're right. There's just not a lot of card draw in this game that requires you to, like, there's one action that lets you bin your cards and draw like that many plus one extra. But again, having to rely on that action is kind of difficult. And I found that action spot wasn't great for generating your engine anyway. So it was more like ancillary stuff that might help you along the way. And yeah, like the cards that really made the meat happen were in Fabricate and Recycle, because like in Fabricate I got to make things, and in Recycle I got to take the things I made and make them into things that were either better for me or victory points. And so like I had, like from the get-go, I had in my starting hand these 3 cards, and I was like, well, that's an engine to make victory points. What was funny is that I got the duct tape, but because the duct tape was the wild resource, I was like, no, I can't spend it on victory points. I need it for something else. And like half the time the engine didn't fire because like I needed to duct tape something else in the robot.
Just duct tape the robot, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine because we're kids and it works. No, so thematically it works. It's nice. It's got really lovely art that I found was charming and endearing and funny at times. You know, I think the game works, and I think it achieves what it wants to be, which is like a Meteor Wingspan. I'm just not sure it's Meteor in the way that I find interesting, or that like I need in my life. If I want Wingspan, I'll just play that. And it's funny because I think since this game came out, and then maybe a month later they announced Wormspan, which is the Meteor Wingspan from the people who made Wingspan. So that's kind of, I don't know where it puts this. It's probably still going to be meatier than Wormspan, but
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
This seems to be like the remake episode, Efka, because the next game, our last game, is Sidereal Confluence Bifurcation. Did I say that right?
Yes, you
Which
did.
comes from publisher WizKids by designer Tausetti Dykman with art by Quanchai Moria.
Elaine.
Yeah.
Elaine.
Yeah.
Elaine.
Yeah.
I finally got to play the Sidereal Confluence expansion.
Hooray!
I'm so happy. I am so happy.
Is it minimum 4?
It's minimum 3, but I wouldn't
Minimum
play this.
3,
I wouldn't
okay.
play this with 3. I think 4 is an okay number. 5, I think, is the good number of players for Sidereal Confluence. We played it with 6.
Yeah, we did.
Because
we're like that.
Yeah, we're like that. Not like cool, but we're just like that.
Awkward like that.
Yeah, we are. It did not fit onto our table.
No.
It was a mess. I don't know how to begin this. So let me just be bluntly honest. Sidereal Confluence is my favorite game of all time. And Sidereal Confluence Bifurcation is an expansion that I had for 2 years that I didn't get to play because, the world had things going on in it and you don't want 6 people trading cubes in a room necessarily.
No. You don't want 6 people breathing in the same room.
Yeah, But anyway, it didn't feel like, even though it was my favorite game, it was, justifiable at certain times. But whatever, it's 2024 and we were like, it's time to do it. And so I sprung this on my friends who were unsuspecting of this event happening.
Well, were they though? Because they know how much you like that game.
Some people were new to the idea of Sidereal Confluence, and that was the most fun part because we didn't just play Sidereal Confluence, we played Sidereal Confluence Bifurcation. So this is a weird game that I really love, that is quite convoluted and messy. And then to add to that weirdness, we added an expansion that makes it weirder and more
messier.
Convoluted and messier. And we introduced 2 people who've never played it, one person who's played it the one time, and also there was another player who's played it a few times like we have, and then there was you and me.
Yeah. Do you know what? The next morning I woke up, I thought, oh no, I'm sick because my throat was so dry, really super dry, and my voice wouldn't come properly. And then I realized, no, it's because you've been shouting at other, not shouting, but to do trades. You've been trying to do trades for 4 hours or whatever. How long did we play that game for?
A long time.
It was a long time.
It
was many hours. And I have been shouting this whole time. No, give me the thing. I'll do the thing if you do like this, right? So that's why my throat was bad the next day.
If you're not familiar with Sidereal Confluence, it is our game of the year for the year 2017. It is a trading and negotiation game. The gist of it is that you are each playing a space faction in a galactic forum, which is all about advancing together and propping each other up and becoming the best space to do space the way you
want to do space.
Yeah, you want to do space, right? So with that in mind, you are trading for a cavalcade of various different resources with incredibly asymmetrical factions. And then the second half of each round is this point resource conversion Eurogame engine thing that is unique to you because what you're doing is completely different from what other players are doing. And the original game had 9 factions. So Bifurcation introduces 9 more factions, except it's the same factions, but each faction has an alternate, kind of offshoot. So, for example, I was playing the Imdrill, and I was kind of sad because that faction is, I find one of the hardest factions for me to play, and their whole thing is that they start really strong because they have these really good conversion engines, but they're limited as to how many they can run because they have fleets, and each converter has fleet costs. So, the original Imdrill could get more fleets as the game went on. This Imdrill had 5 fleets for the entire game. That's it. You don't get no more. But you get these factories, which upgrade other players' colonies, which probably other players, because your colony limit is 0, which are planets, which also generate resources, but without having to input anything. So, other players should want them. But because they generate one thing every turn, they become less and less good as the game goes on. So there's immediately a question of okay, so I'm very limited, but I have this good start. right? But now I'm more limited, but I have another thing that's very good at the beginning of the game and then becomes less good as the game goes on. And somehow, through this arcane system of everyone doing a different thing, I have to figure out a plan, a strategy that is arguable, because you have to argue that like to another player by saying, no, this is good for you, you want this, and this isn't as good for me as you think it is, so let's do a trade that kind of works for both of us, because this will benefit, and that over and over and over and over again.
You are very much generally in games a control player rather than an aggro player.
To use some magic parlance.
I can't think of a better way of describing it. Like, you are happy to start slow and build up and build up and build up and build up. Right?
Yes.
I'm more of an aggro player generally, so I want to be able to do the things and do them now. Right? I don't want to have to faff about. So the style of your play did not gel particularly well with your faction, I think.
No, it didn't. But like, here's the fun thing. And this is so typical of Sidereal Confluence. As I was playing, I was like, when I finished the game, I didn't do well. I came 4th out of 6, and I was like, oh, I know what I needed to do, right? I needed, because almost everything in this game is tradable. And again, another beautiful function of this game is that all deals are binding.
Yes.
You can make promises, but you're bound to them, right? At very punitive costs as well if you don't fulfill them. So I needed to trade other factions' converters that I wouldn't be limited to run, because there are people by the end of the game with so many converters, because anytime anyone invents something in this game, everyone gets it. And the table becomes overflown with various cards. I needed to find what other people had that they were not running and say, look, you're not running this.
Yeah. Well, similarly with my faction, so I don't remember the name of it, but I had these cards where I would trade them away to other players, and it would mean that they weren't able to use a certain resource, but they would produce that resource.
Yes.
Right? So, and I don't think I was aggro enough, weirdly enough, because I should have done them all at the beginning. Like, I should have got as many out as I possibly could at the very beginning of the game, when people didn't care so much about resources. And what was weird was that nobody traded those away with each other. Do you know what I mean? So because that is a tradable resource. I mean, everything in the game, apart from victory points, is a tradable resource, right? Pretty much. So, because I think in our review or in our Game of the Year video, we said, like, you can trade away your mother or whatever. But everything apart from victory points is tradable. And so you could, like, I could have given that or traded that card to someone. They could have produced the resource for like a couple of rounds and traded it away to someone else that didn't need that resource, but it would have been helpful to them to have produced it. But I think there is so much going on, and you are constantly thinking about, okay, what do I need to make? What can I make? Who is making the things that I need? That there's so much to keep track of all the time.
Yeah.
That I don't think I particularly did that well. I should have been like more, I'll give you this if you give me this, and don't worry, you can always trade it away to someone else at a later time. I
think that brings up a really important point about Sidereal Confluence. So, like I said, I love this game. I'm blind to its faults, right? Like, I completely, like, it's just wonderful, right? But here's the thing about it, right? All the factions are so different and so bizarre and so unique and evocative of the setting, that to really kind of get your head around it, you need to know all 9 of them quite intimately and know and understand how each interacts with each other and know, like, the unwritten weird things that you can do with them, like to manipulate the game's dials in unspoken ways, to make trades that are seemingly arcane and bizarre but ultimately benefit you, right? So it needs, like, intimate familiar knowledge. Now, what the expansion Bifurcation does is it adds 9 new ones. And that is so monumentally bonkers. I think this game was bonkers to begin with, right? And that's why I loved it so much. I don't know if it needed another layer of bonkers, but on a personal level, I'm happy that it exists because I love this game and I love that there's more of this bizarreness and kind of, for me, that bizarreness translates to joy, right? Pure and unadulterated joy. You know, I just vibe with it. But do you feel the same?
I think it makes it come even more alive. I think the game is very alive as it is. It more than any other trading game that I've played. Quite often, if there is trading in a game, like real time trading, I am not very good at it. I'm not very good at speaking up. I sometimes will just sit back and sit out and be like, okay, let everyone else do what they want to do. But this game is so very alive. You want to talk to people and you want to get the resources you need, because if you don't, your engine is going to get worse and worse and worse, or at least isn't going to get any better. So you're going to be making the same amount of resources when everyone else is making much more or much better resources. And I think, but my point was the new factions, because they are offshoots of the old factions, it makes it even more alive, because it's like the civilizations aren't just a homogenous mass of civilization. They're not these people that always do this thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's a bit like when, you know, my problem sometimes with sci-fi or fantasy is that this particular type of people speak this language and are this way.
Yeah.
Which we do not live on a planet where that is true. We are all humans and we are all very different. We all have different cultures, different languages, different ways of doing things, right? And I think this introduces that, which is weird. Like, it almost introduces a more human element into Sidereal Confluence.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think one of the reasons I vibe with Sidereal Confluence so much is because how wholesome it actually is, right? Like, there is an element of it that feels very progressive, in that this is a very, and I'm not the only person to remark on this, but this is one of the very few real-time negotiation games where making deals is always a positive for both players involved, right? Yeah. You will win if you prop each other up.
Yeah.
If you manage to make a good relationship with someone and, you know, kind of get into a zone of like this trading with maybe one or two people, you know, you are really elevating each other. And that's really cool to have that. Now, this is where my perennial Zeph warning has to come in.
Oh, yeah.
One of the factions, the Zeph, I would highly recommend to not play with it, right? Now, we haven't tried, for that reason, we haven't tried the Zeph, the new version of Zeph, which is no longer a racketeering organization, but they're called like some charity something, you know, charity conglomerate or something like that. It doesn't make it sound good, but basically I had two bad experiences where I played the Zeph and I made people feel very bad. And I regret those times. I thought I was playing my faction well. No, what I was doing, I was making people feel uncomfortable, right? And I have learned to not touch the Zeph.
Do you think there is a way to play the Zeph that would not make people feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, so there is that way. It is, first of all, with a big trigger warning. Second, everyone's played this game a bunch of times before. Everyone knows what the Zeph does, and how they work, and what the deal is. That someone is going to come over to you and say to you, give me free stuff or I will hurt you. That is going to actively happen in the game over and over and over again. Right?
Yeah, and then you can make the decision whether you want to play with that faction or not.
Yes, and if everyone on the table fully cognizantly, not duped into it, but fully cognizantly agrees to this, then and only then play with the Zeph. Otherwise, consider this an 8, not a 9-player game at the maximum player count.
Yeah. Just to come back to like trading and things, what I really do like very much about this game, and the fact that trades are binding, is that you don't have to trade immediately. So I can say to you, well, I don't have the resource you need now, but I really need that resource that you have right now. Like, I really need it. So if you give me that now, I will give you something much better than like retail value.
Yeah.
In like a round or 2 rounds maybe, because that's when I will get it. And will that be okay for you?
Yeah.
I love that about it.
Yeah, it's a really cool mechanism. And with that also comes donations, right? So donations is this existing mechanism in Sidereal Confluence, which is like you make resources that you have to give away. You make them, but you can't have them. You often make more of them than you normally would. And people can see that they are donations, right? So the way that Impact trades is very, very funky, because if you can trade the donations 1 for 1 for the same resource, that like you're just really winning there. But you know, if you make a promise, you'll say to someone, "Hey, I'll give you you know, like a blue and a yellow cube for this yellow cube." You're like, but next round, you're like, okay. And then you make them in donations and go, here, have them, right? Like, so there's sneaky things about it, but like the sneakiness is transparent and obvious because everyone can kind of see what you're doing and can discuss this on a kind of like level-headed way, which I find very positive and very nice. Having said that, one of the new factions only makes donations.
Right.
Make it work.
Yeah. Everything that you make, you have to give away. Which was made this situation where like, oh, okay, so this person has yellow cubes, but they can't use them. But you have yellow cubes and you can use them, right? But if you trade those yellow cubes, there is a net gain of 0, net loss of 0.
Yeah.
But now for you, but they have a net gain of 1 cube. Right? But it doesn't matter for you. But you are still doing this trade that benefits them, but the overall trade like doesn't actually make any difference to you. It's really weird.
It is really weird, yeah. But like, and I guess that kind of sums up, you know, Sidereal Confluence.
I love it. I think know. Having those different abilities, like the asymmetry is really what makes this game, and the negotiation and
the way the mechanisms of each faction thematically reflect, you know, what they do. It's really beautiful. I would not recommend this game to anyone. I would not. Like, it's my favorite game of all time, right? It's a very niche, weird, specific thing that just ticks every box that I have, and I enjoy it and love it. I can tell from this that you do as well.
I do, yeah.
You know, I will never get rid of my copy. I will love it forever, but it is such a specific thing and such an immense table hog. Do you know what? I don't know. I'm just going to put the banner image is just going to be an image of the cards or something like that, you know, like, and what the table looks like. And it's going to be cropped out. Just, you know, look at the banner image for this episode and six times that.
You can't play it on a train.
No,
that would be.
We couldn't play it on our table. Our huge table.
You might need the floor.
Yeah, did not accommodate this game.
I would recommend this to people, but if it sounds interesting to you, if this is something that sounds like your jam, I would recommend it, but I would recommend playing it with people that have already played it, already know how to play it, and are kind and will teach you how to play it.
Yeah.
Not just teach you the rules, but teach you what this game is about.
Yeah, what the vibes are and what the ethos is. And just be ready for a teach that's really weird, because Sidereal Confluence teaches like no other game teaches. Because what you have to do is you basically have to give people whatever faction they're playing, and without like giving the briefest summary of how the game works, just say, sit, read, vibe with it, and eventually it will come. And then do a second teach, reiterating everything that you already explained. So there's a barrier to this game.
Be prepared for a long teach.
Yeah, it's a long, weird... It's not just a long teach, it's a long, weird teach, right? Because you can't teach this like a normal game. No. Because there's just way too much asymmetry. You know, like, if you end up... like, Root, you have to end up explaining every faction exactly how it works, because Root is that precise. It needs to be that precise with the conflict. Imagine Root, but like a real-time negotiation game, but like with, you know, 9 possible factions. And again, a possible 9-player game. That could even be a thing. You can't teach all 9 factions to everyone. Everyone has just to sit there and kind of vibe with it and get what that faction is doing. and sort of how the game flows before starting the game. And then because the rules of the game are quite simple. First of all, 10-minute round of everyone trading. You can trade whatever you want apart from victory points. That's the rules of that, right?
Have my dog.
Yeah. If you trade away something that has your faction symbol on it, you get it back during the next round. But, otherwise, the trades are permanent. Okay. Trades are binding. Okay.
It's
that symbol.
Simple.
Yeah. And then it says, in the economy phase, put things that it says on the left, they'll come out as different things on the right. These 2 green cubes, small cubes, become like
a yellow cube.
A yellow cube and another green cube or whatever, right? Like, okay, that makes sense. I made more cube. Yeah, right? Like, and then you have a bidding phase for new technologies, right? And new colonies, which also make you stuff. And then you have to invent. Okay. Wait a minute, how does this all work, right? Because suddenly there's all these asymmetries and rules and like...
What's weird, so you can't trade victory points, but you can bid on a colony or a research team, and that research team or that colony might bring you victory points, right? But before it has, you could trade it away so that the person that you trade it away to gets those victory points for that.
I know.
So effectively, you're kind of saying, well, okay, I'm going to bid on that because you've got nothing that you have no ability to bid because you don't have the right resources to be able to bid. So I'll bid on it for you, which is what happened. I'll bid on it for you and I'll give it to you, but I want this for it. And it's like so intertwined. Everything is so intertwined. It's incredible.
Well, I think it's very clear that we love Sidereal Confluence Bifurcation. The new version, and we love Sidereal Confluence. Do not buy Sidereal Confluence Bifurcation if you've never played Sidereal Confluence. Trust me, Sidereal Confluence is game enough.
Yes.
Right?
Agreed.
If you feel like, okay, I've got the vibe of this down, I need more, then Bifurcation is somewhere. It exists. It's out there, right? What a game. I love it, but I don't know if I can recommend it.
That's all the games for this episode. Efka, what is on the bonus episode and where can people access it?
For those of you who support us on Patreon, that is patreon.com/nopunincluded, link in the description, we have a bonus episode every time we release a main episode. On today's bonus episode, we have our returning feature On the Take, where we talk about another trick taker. This time it's inflation. That's inflation with an exclamation mark. We're also going to be talking about Wandering Towers, a very cool family-weight game.
Thank you so much for listening. And lastly, I don't need to ask this, but what is the game of the episode, Efka?
I should be a sensible person and say Age of Innovation, but of course it's
You're not.
Sidereal Confluence Bifurcation. And with that, why don't you say goodbye, Elaine?
Goodbye, Elaine.
Goodbye, Elaine.